The Erdogan-Zelensky Summit. How Turkey's bold stand in Ankara reshaped the war in Ukraine and challenged the entire global order. I am Master William, and this is the Executive Report. Zelensky inaugurated a new Ukrainian embassy in Turkey, and only a few hours later he stood beside President Erdogan in Ankara during one of the most critical meetings since the beginning of the war. Turkey has supported Ukraine politically, militarily, and strategically from the very first days of the conflict. But this meeting was different because the entire world was simultaneously watching another negotiation happening thousands of kilometers away in Saudi Arabia. At the exact same moment, American and Russian officials were holding high-level talks in Riyadh while Ankara was becoming the center of another diplomatic front. The delegation in Riyadh was led by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, while American representatives discussed the future of the war and the direction of possible peace negotiations. For many observers, the talks in Saudi Arabia represented the beginning of a new global diplomatic phase. There were discussions about sanctions against Russia, possible ceasefire mechanisms, and the future role of Europe in negotiations. Reports also suggested that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin could potentially meet in the near future if diplomatic progress continued. Yet while the world focused on Riyadh, another unexpected development emerged from Ankara. President Erdogan publicly declared that Ukraine's territorial integrity was non-negotiable and must be protected under all circumstances. He specifically mentioned Crimea and the Donbas region and insisted that these territories should remain under Ukrainian control. Those statements immediately shocked political analysts because they represented one of Erdogan's clearest public messages against Putin since the war began. For years, Turkey had carefully balanced its relationship between Russia and Ukraine. Ankara maintained economic ties with Moscow while simultaneously supplying military support to Kiev. Erdogan positioned himself as a mediator capable of speaking with both sides while avoiding direct confrontation with Putin. But during this summit, his tone appeared stronger, sharper, and far more direct than before. The Donbas region is one of the most strategically important territories in Eastern Europe. It contains massive reserves of coal, minerals, industrial infrastructure, and energy-related resources. For Putin, controlling Donbas has always been central to his long-term geopolitical ambitions in Ukraine. The Kremlin views the region not only as a military objective but also as an economic and symbolic prize. Crimea holds equally critical importance in Russian strategy. The peninsula gives Russia dominance over large sections of the Black Sea and provides access to key naval positions. Since annexing Crimea in 2014, Moscow has heavily militarized the area and transformed it into a strategic fortress. For Ukraine, however, Crimea remains a national symbol whose loss continues to define the war emotionally and politically. When Erdogan openly stated that Crimea should remain Ukrainian territory, it was interpreted as a direct challenge to Moscow's objectives. Political commentators immediately noticed that Ankara was no longer limiting itself to cautious diplomatic language. Instead, Turkey appeared ready to publicly defend Ukrainian sovereignty in much stronger terms than before. That shift created new speculation about Turkey's future role in the conflict. Another major issue discussed during the summit involved American military assistance to Ukraine. After meetings with Russian representatives, the White House announced that support for Kiev could continue under certain conditions. One proposal reportedly involved giving the United States significant access to Ukraine's natural resources and rare earth minerals. These minerals are considered strategically valuable because they are essential for advanced technology industries and defense systems. Donald Trump had already spoken publicly about the possibility of linking future aid to economic agreements. His argument was that America had invested enormous resources into supporting Ukraine during the war. According to this view, Washington should receive economic benefits in return for continued military and financial assistance. The idea immediately sparked intense debate among Ukrainian officials and international observers. President Zelensky reportedly reacted negatively to the proposal and refused to accept the agreement in its original form. The Ukrainian leadership feared that such a deal could place key national resources under foreign influence during wartime. Some officials also worried that Ukraine could become economically dependent after surviving military aggression. The White House responded by criticizing Zelensky's refusal and described the decision as short-sighted. This disagreement created confusion across diplomatic circles. How could Ukraine risk tensions with the United States while still depending heavily on Western support? Why would Zelensky reject such a critical proposal during one of the most dangerous phases of the war? And did Erdogan's strong backing during the Ankara summit influence Ukraine's confidence in those negotiations? Many analysts believe the answer may indeed be connected to Turkey's growing support. Erdogan's statements may have convinced Kyiv that it still possessed powerful allies willing to defend Ukrainian sovereignty. Turkey's strategic location, military strength, and influence in the Black Sea give Ankara enormous geopolitical importance. That support potentially strengthens Zelensky's negotiating position against both Washington and Moscow. Turkey has played a unique role throughout the war since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion. Unlike many NATO members, Ankara maintained communication channels with both Kyiv and Moscow simultaneously. Turkey supplied drones and military equipment to Ukraine while also continuing diplomatic dialogue with Russia. This balancing strategy allowed Erdogan to present himself as both mediator and regional power broker. One of Turkey's most important achievements during the conflict was the Black Sea Grain Agreement. The deal allowed Ukrainian agricultural exports to continue despite naval tensions and blockades in the region. Millions of tons of grain were transported through the corridor, helping stabilize food markets around the world. The agreement also demonstrated Turkey's ability to negotiate practical arrangements between hostile parties. Erdogan repeatedly reminded reporters about these mediation efforts during the summit with Zelensky. He emphasized that Turkey had already proven capable of facilitating communication during moments of extreme tension. According to Erdogan, Ankara could once again become the ideal location for future peace negotiations. That statement positioned Turkey as a possible center of future diplomatic efforts involving Russia and Ukraine. Economic cooperation between Turkey and Ukraine also became a major focus of discussions. Officials from both countries announced plans to significantly increase bilateral trade in the coming years. The target discussed after the summit was raising trade volume toward $10 billion annually. Both governments argued that deeper economic integration would strengthen long-term strategic cooperation. Ukraine's economy has suffered devastating damage since the war began. Industrial infrastructure, energy systems, transportation routes, and agricultural facilities have all been heavily affected. As a result, Kyiv urgently needs strong economic partnerships capable of supporting reconstruction and recovery efforts. Turkey sees this situation as both an opportunity for cooperation and a strategic regional investment. Another important factor behind Erdogan's statements was his relationship with the United States. Turkey has recently attempted to improve communication and cooperation with Washington after years of strained relations. Erdogan understands that maintaining positive ties with America strengthens Turkey's leverage inside NATO and international diplomacy. By supporting Ukraine while avoiding direct confrontation with Washington, Ankara increases its strategic importance. At the same time, Erdogan clearly wants to avoid total dependence on Western policies. Turkey often pursues an independent foreign policy designed to maximize its own regional influence. This approach allows Ankara to cooperate with NATO while still protecting its own national interests. The summit with Zelensky reflected this careful balance between alliance commitments and independent strategy. Many observers also noticed another critical signal hidden inside Erdogan's remarks. He suggested that if Russia rejected peace proposals, Turkey could become more deeply involved in the conflict. That possibility immediately raised questions about what deeper Turkish involvement might actually look like. And the answer largely centers around Turkey's military and naval capabilities in the Black Sea. Turkey possesses one of NATO's strongest military forces and controls access to the Black Sea through the Turkish Straits. Since the beginning of the war, Ankara has restricted the movement of Russian warships through these waterways. Turkey derives this authority from the Montreux Convention, which regulates naval access to the Black Sea region. This decision alone significantly limited Russian naval flexibility during the conflict. Control over the Bosporus and Dardanelles gives Turkey enormous strategic leverage against Moscow. Any expansion of Turkish restrictions could place additional pressure on Russian military operations in the region. Turkey has also supplied military equipment directly to Ukraine throughout the war. Among the most famous examples are the Bayraktar TB2 drones, which gained global attention during early fighting. These drones played a significant role in Ukrainian battlefield operations and became symbols of resistance. Their effectiveness increased Turkey's reputation as an important defense technology power. In addition to drones, Turkey supplied armored vehicles and various forms of military assistance to Kiev. This support demonstrated that Ankara was willing to take real risks in support of Ukraine despite Russian objections. One major example involves advanced aircraft engine cooperation between Turkish and Ukrainian companies. Several Turkish drone and fighter projects use engines developed with Ukrainian technology and expertise. This cooperation strengthened defense industries in both countries while reducing dependence on foreign suppliers. Turkey's naval modernization efforts also became a major topic after the summit. The Turkish government recently announced massive investments into new warships, submarines, and missile destroyers. These projects are part of a broader strategy aimed at increasing Turkish power projection capabilities. Analysts believe Ankara wants to establish itself as the dominant regional naval power in the Black Sea. One of the most ambitious projects involves Turkey's planned national aircraft carrier program. The project symbolizes Ankara's desire to join the ranks of major global naval powers. The TF-2000 guided missile destroyer is designed to strengthen Turkey's air defense and naval combat capabilities. Such capabilities would significantly improve Turkey's ability to challenge hostile forces in the Black Sea. Military analysts increasingly believe Turkey could become one of the most influential naval actors in Europe. At the same time, Erdoğan continues balancing confrontation with diplomacy. He understands that direct conflict with Russia would carry major economic and security consequences for Turkey. Overall, the summit between Erdoğan and Zelensky signaled a major turning point in regional diplomacy. Turkey appears increasingly determined to protect Ukrainian sovereignty while expanding its own strategic influence. For Zelensky, the meeting with Erdoğan provided more than symbolic diplomatic support. It demonstrated that Ukraine still possesses influential allies willing to challenge Russian ambitions publicly. For Erdoğan, the summit reinforced Turkey's role as a rising regional power capable of shaping international events. And for the wider world, it showed that the future of the war may depend as much on Ankara as on Washington or Moscow. Will Turkey's bold stance bring peace or escalation? Can Erdoğan truly balance between NATO and Moscow? Subscribe to the Executive Report with Master William and turn on notifications for more geopolitical analysis.